My name is Elena Hayes, and the story I am about to share is one I never imagined would become the defining chapter of my life. Before I begin, I want to say this. If you have ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, or if you have ever felt powerless in the face of something you knew was wrong, then please stay with me until the end. My story is for you. And before we dive in, if stories like this resonate with you, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Your support is what allows stories like mine to be told. Now, let me take you back to the moment everything changed. I grew up in coastal Maine, surrounded by the cold salt breeze and the constant hum of tourists shuffling in and out of my grandmother's hotels. Her Empire Hayes Luxury Hospitality Group had been a landmark in the region for nearly 60 years. She built it from the ground up, beginning with a single beachfront in that my late grandfather had renovated by hand. Over decades, that humble beginning grew into a chain of boutique luxury hotels stretching across New England. To the world, my grandmother Beatrice Hayes was a legend. To me, she was simply Gran. I spent most of my childhood in her company, learning from her not just about the business, but about people. Gran used to say, "Money does not change people, Elena. It reveals them." I did not understand how true that was until much later. My mother, Caroline, never shared my bond with Gran. She loved glamour and appearances, but she never had the discipline or grit to run a company. When she married Richard Halston, everything about her slowly shifted. Richard was charismatic in public, charming with a hint of arrogance, but something about him always felt manufactured. Too smooth, too polished, like a man whose every gesture had been rehearsed in the mirror. Gran never trusted him. Neither did I. But when my father died unexpectedly in an accident during my junior year of high school, our lives spiraled into a vulnerable quietness that Richard slipped into almost effortlessly. Within a year, he proposed to my mother. Within 2 years, he began attending Hayes Group board meetings as if the company belonged to him. Gran tolerated him for my mother's sake. Barely. As for me, I avoided him. His smile never touched his eyes. By the time I turned 22, Gran's health began to decline. Not dramatically, just the kind of tiredness that makes doctors recommend longer rest and less stress. She refused to step down but agreed to lighten her workload. And that was when she asked me to join her. Those words still echo inside me. "Elena, you are the only one I trust to carry this legacy." It was overwhelming, but it was also the greatest honor of my life. I started training with her every day, understanding financial structures, hospitality operations, risk management, negotiation strategies. Gran taught me with a patience I can never repay. And in those months, our bond deepened even further. But then, something happened. My mother and Richard began injecting themselves into every decision Gran tried to make. They pressured her to retire for her health, demanded control over major assets, pushed for restructuring the board. And when that did not work, they started undermining me subtly, then aggressively. They accused me of being too inexperienced, too emotional, too attached to tradition, unprepared for a real corporate environment. They wanted control. They wanted it desperately. Gran, however, refused. She reinforced my position, encouraged me, insisted I was doing well. But the more she protected me, the more frustrated my mother and Richard became. Their resentment was palpable, poisoning every family gathering, every shared room, every glance. Everything escalated the night Gran collapsed. I remember standing in her hospital room, my hands shaking, the sound of monitors filling the silence between us. The doctors said it was exhaustion mixed with stress and heart strain. She needed rest. She needed peace. My mother burst into tears. Richard held her dramatically, but I saw the glimmer of calculation flickering behind his expression. Gran, weak but lucid, called me to her side. "Do not let them touch what does not belong to them," she whispered. "The company is yours, Elena. Everything is already arranged." Those words would soon pull a storm into my life, because 3 days later, Gran passed away quietly in her sleep. The world mourned a legend. But behind those condolences, behind the polite smiles and sympathetic eyes, a darker reality was brewing. The reading of the will was held in Grand's attorney's office. I remember the tension in the air so vividly, it almost feels like the memory is happening in slow motion. My mother's hands trembled not from grief, but anticipation. Richard sat beside her, his posture too relaxed, too controlled. The attorney cleared his throat and began. Gran left me everything. Her entire personal estate. All her shares in Hayes Group 52%, giving me majority control. The hotels, the properties, the trusts, all of it. I felt tears flooding my eyes. I was not thinking about wealth or power. I was thinking about her love, about her belief in me, about her final words in that hospital room. But my mother's face, I can still see it. A blend of shock, rage, betrayal, and something colder envy. And then Richard leaned forward with a thin smile. Is that so? He said softly. We will need to review the legal validity of this will. It was not disbelief. It was a threat. Within 24 hours, everything began crumbling. The board was suddenly reevaluating my position. My access to key documents was revoked. My mother claimed I was emotionally unstable from grief and needed time away from business matters. Richard requested an emergency meeting, arguing that Gran had not been in a sound mental state when the will was revised. And then, the worst blow. I discovered that my mother and Richard had taken temporary control over the company to avoid instability while the will was being reviewed. I had majority shares. I had legal ownership, but they had something else. The board's fear, connections, influence, and a hunger for power that overruled ethics. They froze me out completely. I went from being Gran's chosen successor to being treated like an inconvenient obstacle standing in their way. The betrayal broke something inside me, but I did not know yet. This was only the beginning, because my grandmother, sharp, wise, always 3 steps ahead, had anticipated everything, and the twist she left behind would change everything. The weeks following my grandmother's funeral unfolded like a slow, suffocating nightmare. Every morning, I woke up expecting to step back into the world she had prepared for me: conference rooms, strategy meetings, coffee with the operations team, afternoons reviewing budgets or new property proposals. That was supposed to be my future. She trained me for it. She trusted me with it. Instead, all I received were emails informing me that my privileges had been revoked. My access card to the headquarters stopped working. My mother politely requested that I refrain from contacting employees to avoid confusion. And Richard stopped pretending entirely. He called me a child playing in a world I was never meant to inherit. It stunned me how fast they moved, how rehearsed everything felt, as if they had been waiting, planning, counting down the days until Gran was gone. I tried to fight back. I called the attorney. I called board members. I requested meetings. But every door shut in my face. They kept repeating the same empty phrase. We need time to assess the situation. Time to them meant stripping me of everything my grandmother had left behind. I remember one evening vividly. I walked along the edge of the pier behind our oldest hotel, the one my grandfather rebuilt after the fire. The wind was sharp. The waves crashed against the rocks. I felt the cold seep into my bones. I whispered into the night, "Gran, what do I do now?" There was no answer, just the sound of water churning below my feet. But something inside me refused to break. Because Gran did not raise me to be fragile. She raised me to be resilient. And 2 days later, the first crack appeared in my mother and Richard's polished takeover. It started with a phone call. The number on my screen belonged to Martha Ellis, my grandmother's closest friend and longtime business partner. Martha was a board member, but unlike the others, she had stopped attending meetings after Gran's death. When I answered, her voice trembled slightly. "Elena, we need to talk. Your grandmother left something for you." My heart thudded. "What do you mean?" "Not something," she corrected herself. "Someone." I did not understand. But I agreed to meet her at the Lakeshore Cottage, Gran's favorite retreat, tucked away on a quiet property she purchased long before Hayes Group existed. When I arrived, the cottage was warm. A fire burned in the stone fireplace, and sitting beside Martha was an elderly man with white hair and tired but kind eyes. "Elena," Martha said softly, "this is Attorney Harrison Lindell. He was your grandmother's private legal counsel. Not the one the company knows about. Not the one anyone else had access to." The man nodded slowly. "Your grandmother anticipated that someone might try to contest her decisions. She wanted to protect you, but she also wanted to observe how things unfolded first." I felt my breath tighten. "You mean she knew my mother and Richard would do this?" "Not with certainty," he replied, "but she understood their ambitions." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written on the front in Gran's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, and the moment my eyes reached the first sentence, tears blurred my vision. "My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, it means the people who should have stood by you have chosen to stand against you instead. I am sorry, my darling, but I did not leave you unprepared." I pressed the letter to my chest for a moment before I continued reading. "Everything they believe they have taken from you is temporary. I place certain safeguards. The true will, the controlling documents, and the authority over Hayes Group are not where they think they are." I lifted my eyes. "What does that mean?" Attorney Lindell reached into his briefcase and pulled out a heavy black binder. "This," he said, "is the real succession plan. It includes the updated will, corporate transfer agreements, revised shareholder documents, and directives for the board. Your grandmother signed them in full health and under recorded verification. She also established a contingency clause that delays execution until all conditions are met." "Which conditions?" I whispered. He watched me carefully. "You have to step forward publicly as the rightful successor. Not through the board, not through your mother, not through Richard. Your grandmother designed it so that they cannot legally assume control unless you surrender it." "I did not surrender anything," I said sharply. "And that is why you still have power." Martha placed a gentle hand on mine. "Elena, your grandmother believed in you, but she needed you to understand who you were up against before you could lead." A quiet sob escaped my throat. Gran was gone, but she was still protecting me, still teaching me, still leading me. For the next several days, we worked tirelessly. Attorney Lindell guided me through every document, every clause, every safeguard Gran put in place. Most of the board had been manipulated, not malicious. They had acted out of uncertainty, emotion, pressure from my mother and Richard. But with Gran's real documents, everything could change. There was only one obstacle left: a private shareholders' meeting scheduled for Friday morning. According to the board's public records, they intended to strip me of my voting rights, pending mental health review. It was a tactic often used in high-conflict corporate disputes, but in this case, it was entirely fabricated. If they succeeded, even temporarily, the company would slip into Richard's control. I had 4 days to stop them. 4 days to change everything. 4 days to honor the woman who raised me. And then, just when I thought I had found my footing again, I received another blow. A message from the chief financial officer, forwarded to my private inbox. Richard was planning to liquidate several hotel assets. Assets that carried my grandparents' legacy. Assets that were never meant to be touched. I felt something inside me ignite. A fire that had been waiting since the moment Gran died. They were not just trying to steal from me. They were trying to erase her. Erase everything she built. And that, I could never allow. Friday came faster than I expected. I barely slept the night before the shareholders' meeting. I kept replaying Gran's voice in my mind, her steady tone, her unwavering confidence in me. She once told me, "A leader does not rise because she is given permission. She rises because she refuses to stay down." Her words guided me as I got dressed that morning in a black suit she had tailored for me months before her death. She said it made me look like a woman who knew where she was going. I hoped she was right. When I arrived at the headquarters, the lobby was buzzing. Employees whispered as I walked past. Some offered sympathetic looks. Others glanced cautiously, unsure which side to stand on. But I did not come alone. Attorney Lindell carried the binder Gran's real legacy. Martha walked beside me, radiating quiet authority. And two more board members who had known Gran since the early days met us by the elevators, nodding solemnly. We stepped into the boardroom together. My mother and Richard were already there. My mother's face was stiff with shock. She had not expected me to show up. Richard, on the other hand, smiled with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. "Elena," he drawled, "this meeting is private. You are not permitted to attend." Attorney Lindell placed a sheet of paper on the table. "You are mistaken," he said calmly. "As legal representative for the majority shareholder, she not only has the right to attend, she has the right to lead this meeting." The room fell silent. Richard's smirk wavered. My mother's jaw tightened. "What majority shareholder?" Richard scoffed. "Her ownership is under review, pending verification of her mental state." The audacity would have been laughable if it were not so dangerous. I stepped forward. "My mental state is perfectly fine. What is not fine is your attempt to commit corporate fraud." Gasps rippled through the room. Richard's eyes narrowed. "Be very careful with your accusations." "I am," I replied, lifting the binder. "Because everything in here proves exactly what you have done and exactly what my grandmother put in place to stop you." Then I opened the binder. Not dramatically, not for show, but with the quiet determination of someone stepping into who she was always meant to be. Attorney Lindell presented the real will, the verified signatures, the video recording of Gran reading her directives aloud, crystal clear, mentally sound, unmistakably intentional. Shock flooded the room. One board member whispered, She protected Elena." Another murmured, "This changes everything." Richard tried to interrupt, his voice rising into anger, but Lindell silenced him with a single sentence. "There is also documentation showing your attempts to coerce the board, manipulate medical evaluations, and illegally assume executive authority." My mother's face drained of color. Richard slammed his hand on the table. "This is outrageous. You cannot prove any of this." Lindell placed another stack of documents on the table. "Actually," he said, "we can. Emails, recorded phone calls, financial transactions, and the CFO's direct statement confirming Richard's plan to liquidate heritage properties without authorization." The evidence was overwhelming. The board erupted. One by one, they turned against him. Questions flew. Accusations piled. And every time Richard tried to talk his way out, he tangled himself even deeper in contradictions. My mother finally spoke, her voice shaking. "Richard, is this true?" He did not answer. And in that silence, everything she believed in began to crumble. The vote happened within minutes. The board unanimously reinstated my authority as majority shareholder and designated successor. Richard was removed from all business activities. A formal investigation was launched. As for my mother, she was not removed, but she stepped back quietly, unable to defend what she had allowed to happen. When the meeting ended, I walked out to the balcony overlooking the harbor. The air felt cold and sharp. My hands trembled not from fear, but from release. Martha joined me. "You did it," she said softly. "No," I whispered. "Gran did. She just trusted me to finish what she started." Martha nodded. She would be proud. I looked out at the water, imagining Gran standing beside me the way she used to. The wind carried her presence, her wisdom, her strength. For the first time since she died, I felt something like peace. But there was one last thing I needed to do. A week later, I visited the garden behind Lakeshore Cottage. Gran loved this place more than any hotel she ever built. She said the garden reminded her that everything strong starts as something small. I knelt beside the rose bush she planted decades ago and whispered, "I will protect what you built. I will honor your name. And I will never let anyone erase your legacy again." A quiet breeze moved through the leaves, and for a moment, I felt as if she answered me. In the months that followed, Hayes Luxury Hospitality Group entered a new era. We renovated key properties with sustainability in mind. We improved employee benefits, a promise Gran always wanted fulfilled. We partnered with local communities. We expanded the scholarship fund she established for young women pursuing business education. Under my leadership, the company did not just grow. It became stronger, more grounded, more compassionate. Gran's legacy lived on. And so did her belief in me. Now, if you have stayed with me through this entire journey, I hope you take away something important. Sometimes the people who are meant to love you will fail you. Sometimes you will be pushed aside, underestimated, or silenced. But that does not define you. What defines you is the moment you choose to stand up. The moment you step into your truth. The moment you decide that your story is worth fighting for. Because it is. It always is. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, or if you saw a part of your own experiences reflected in it, please consider leaving a comment, liking the story, and subscribing to the channel. Your support means more than you know, and it helps stories like mine reach others who might need them. Until next time, this is Elena, and this was my truth.